Well, I mean, that's all I have to share besides the debate. I mean, if you got your stuff.
What, so I'm trying to look for like my men, women thing. Okay. So like basically, oh God, I can't like find my text document for the men, women thing. Why am I having trouble doing that? Okay. True. Let's see.
Very true.
Basically what it was, I think I remember most of the statistics anyways. This is like the benefit of high subject matter.
Okay.
Is it useful to deploy the rhetoric that men are trash if we're trying to mitigate the effects of harmful masculinity? And it's basically, there are two prongs to this situation. And I think that the accountability for men is important because men have disproportionately been violent and, I guess you can say, unpleasant towards the like female experience.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, there's like a double standard with that as well, where it's like with men, it's like, I think it's about 90% of sexual assaults are committed by men.
Yeah. And
that is an insane statistic. Men are like asymmetrically predisposed towards inflicting upon, the opposite gender as like women are. But the interesting thing though is that that's also like men like constitute a like about 50% of like the population. And Jesus Christ, I think I need my further statistics on this before I comment on it further. But like, so here's the thing though, is it better? Because like basically like even like with those still less than like a 1 percentile of men who actually inflict this upon, other people. Is it better to categorize men in this way, or is there a different way of framing the situation that doesn't demonize men, but also like encourage, better behavioral outcomes? Because in the same sense, we all know what like 1330 means, which is like 13% of the population with African Americans results in 30% of like, like the violent criminality and all that kind of stuff. If men only constitute 13% of the population, it would also be very interchangeable with 1330. If there was basically like, like 87% women and 13% men, it would also be like a statistical like 1330 disparity. There's a reason why we don't say that African Americans are trash. And that's because we understand that there are sociocultural factors that contribute to their behavior. So if we're not willing to say that, African Americans are trash, then why are we willing to say that men are trash? When if we had like the same proportionality of representation in the population, their violent tendencies would pretty much be interchangeable with each other.
I think I get what you're trying to say here. Like, this actually reminds me of something I was on TikTok and they were showing me, for some reason the algorithm is now feeding me segments of Roseanne, and one of the TikToks was when it's found out that Roseanne's husband is cheating on her. And I'm looking at the comments, and it's basically a lot of comments from, I'm assuming, are women. They're basically saying like, yep, all men are like this. Yep, eventually. And, some people are trying to be more reasonable. It's like, well, not every man. And then like usually the response is like, oh, just you wait. Just like, it's going to be every man. And I feel like a lot of that animosity is just driven. Of course, a lot of these, perspectives are driven from personal experience. So like, I would say a lot of women have probably had nothing but negative experiences from men. And that's what drives like a very generalized statement that they would say about the whole group. I think why it also seems to be permissible in a lot of cases is because despite the fact that, yeah, I think you and I both agree that not all men are like that. They're not all violent or rapist or misogynistic, but like, we still benefit from patriarchy. So I guess for a lot of people, it seems like it's an expendable notion to kind of put at the sideline in order to let people voice their, frustrations and criticisms.
Yep.
I don't know if I want to say it's necessarily right, because I don't think it's good to.
At that point, like, what I wonder is like if it drives men towards like correcting their behaviors in a positive way, or if hearing that they're trash actually drives them in the direction.
Well,
it's kind of like what I'm going for, because like, in the same way that it's like, okay, the reason why like I brought up like the 1330 thing was because basically like if men represented the same population percentage as African Americans, it would also be 1330. There would be 13% men with like 30% like violent crime or sexual assault and stuff. So if people are willing to say that men are trash, then they'd also have to be willing to say that like African Americans are trash for like inflicting the same like percentage disparities of violence. But I actually like crunch the numbers and stuff. And if people aren't willing to say that about like African American people, like is it a positive thing to say that about men as to say that they're trash? And to like have that be like the predominant narrative. I think men have to like correct their behavior because they do overrepresent a lot of forms of violence against women. But I think that this like generalized rhetoric might drive a lot of men towards the wrong direction. In the same way that like if we applied that to like African American populations, it would not be fair to the African American population either. It's like if the African American population represented 50% of the population instead of 13% of the population, they would also probably be responsible for like 90% of like violent crimes or whatever, like on a statistical basis, based on what the current statistics apply and like implied. But it's not because they're black. It's like literally because like of the socio-cultural conditions that they're subjected to.
Okay, here's my question then. Do you feel that we should tone police the emotional frustration that people want to voice at that time for the sake of like factual accuracy?
Efficacy.
Or do you feel that, sometimes, hey, people just say shit in the heat of the moment, and maybe if you give them some space, they, might reconsider the position. I think from my perspective, I hear a lot of things said about not just men or women, like even people like that I fall under the same political spectrum of, but like I guess for me I try to depersonalize myself from the situation, because I think there's a lot of guys when they hear like all men are trash and they go, well, I'm not trash, I think I'm a good person. I think if you're that type of guy, I think for you, first of all, is to not take any type of criticism against men as a group on such a personal, singular basis. And maybe at least examine briefly why people might say that.
But would you also like accept the narrative that black people are trash then?
No, I wouldn't, because
like, they also represent like a minority population, like an overrepresentation.
Yeah,
of,
no,
like,
I get that, but I think this also falls back into like the dynamic that black people are still a marginalized group in this country, at least. So they don't benefit from like the hegemony that is provided to, say, like white men.
Well, it's not about like who has like a power imbalance. It's whether or not like it's useful to make that generalization.
Wait, hang on a second. The stream
like,
just
it's like,
restarted.
especially like when it comes to like our trans friends and stuff like that. It's like I don't think like a lot of like our trans fam.
Well, here's
like
the trans thing you bring up is a really good point, because I know there's a lot of trans women who in dating cis men, a lot of them are very frustrated because a lot of them assume that they're chasers, and I think that there's a lot of genuine good guys out there that don't that don't look past trans women because they're trans. I mean, they would be with them regardless. But
is it fair to like include trans men in like the same category of problematic behavioralism as, you know, like cis men?
Well, not even cis men. I don't think a lot of cis men would even include trans men. So like, yeah, I feel like that's problematic in and of itself. I feel like when we're assuming that all men are when we're assuming that all men are trash, it's typically in response to cisgendered men that benefit the most from the patriarchal order. So that's why I don't really consider trans men in that category, because honestly, I think a lot of trans men have a lot of experiences before they transition of dealing with misogyny and stuff like that. So they're very conscientious of it. So actually, that's why a lot of trans men I know seem like some of the most wholesome guys I've ever fucking met, because they've been on the receiving end of like toxic masculinity in a lot of cases. So. Yeah.
But it's kind of like, even if you think trans men are like kind of like absolved of that situation?
No, like, I don't want to say that there's not a trans man that can't be an asshole douchebag. No, I'm not saying that in the slightest.
No, I get it. But like what I'm saying is that like, okay, if we were to like, you know, basically like, you know, like reduce male population down to like African-American population levels, 1330 would apply to men as well. It would literally be like, you know, like right now it's like a 50% like population rate of males is responsible for like 90% of like violent forms of criminality. If you reduce that down to like 13% of like the male population, it's also like down to like 30% male criminality. If you were to basically amplify African-American population levels to like 50% of the population, then it would also like equate to, if we're being proportional, about like 90% of like, you know, violent criminality. So like basically like what I'm saying is like if we're not willing to say that like African Americans are trash for being 13% of the population and accounting for 30% of the violent criminality in the country, then we should also like not be willing to apply like 50% of males being responsible for like 90% of like violent criminality in the United States, because they would be proportional if like they were interchangeable. So like if we're not willing to say that like African Americans are trash, then we should not be willing to say that like, you know, like the male population is trash either. Even though like I completely sympathize with like my female friends who are like willing to say that like, you know, like men are trash because like they've disproportionately like represented like my terrible inbox experiences and stuff like that. It's not whether but do you think that it's like useful to like have that rhetoric?
Okay, I will say that I don't think it's useful. But I also don't think it's useful to you know, essentially mansplain to people their frustrations. I think like it like your situation, what they're saying may drive men away from like, you know, feminist viewpoints. But I also feel like at the same time, your approach may have the opposite effect on a lot of women. Don't you think?
But whose behavior are we trying to correct?
Well, I would say that, you know, it's one thing to be falsely categorized as with a group of people that are all trash. I think it's another thing to experience like violence from said group. I just feel
even like it's less than 1% of men who like actually
less than. But
it's like it's an overrepresentation of like men who are like exposed to the narrative that they're trash. And I don't think that that's like necessarily like a useful way of compelling men and like the general like, you know, like over like the overwhelming population to like change. Like if men hear that like they're trash anyways, even though like only like a minute infinitesimal population of that like group are trash, like I think that's not going to drive them towards like better forms of masculinity. I think masculinity means empathy. I think masculinity means compassion. I think masculinity means that you listen, you're conscientious, and you can be efficacious, you can be assertive, you can be aggressive, and all that kind of stuff. But I think that men hearing that they're trash would be about as destructive as like the African American community also hearing that they're trash, and that like actually statistically bears itself out. And I think it's going to drive a lot of men towards like, you know, not considering alternative modes of masculinity that are actually like healthy and like you. So that's just kind of like my thing with it.
Okay. Do you feel like it's the responsibility of women to correct this, or do you feel like it's men's responsibility to help other men?
Both.
Okay.
I think that when it comes to narratives, I think it's important for people to be responsible with their language in a way that's consequential. And that's not just motivated by feeling. Like, what is the language that we're deploying? And what's the effect of the language that we're deploying? If I'm deploying language that's going to be basically like supportive of Israel, if I'm deploying language that's going to be supportive of Russia, then there's a consequence to that language. In the same way that, like, you know, if somebody is like, you know, deploying language that's misandrist, there's the consequence, there's a possibility that's going to drive men towards doubling down on their bad behaviors. So I think instead of like saying that men are trash, I think it's more beneficial to provide alternatives instead of just saying that, like, you know, just because less than 1% of you do things that we don't like, statistically speaking, you guys all fucking suck. That's my kind of thing.
Okay. All right. I think we're back. Sorry, we lost the connection. So everybody who's watching, essentially, if I may try to steelman your position here, you feel like we should be careful on the rhetoric that we speak of men in fears that it may drive people away to more toxic masculine roles. Is that like the gist of it? Like, I know it's more
the gist of it. And also, like, if we accept that standard, then you would also have to accept that Africa are predisposed to violence in other populations based on a 1330 like situation. So that's why I don't think that it's sustainable, and that's why I don't think it's
okay. All right. So I'm going to say that I agree with you that yes, people should watch what they say in terms of their criticism, but like, I'm only going to go so far in terms of that, because from my perspective, I hear a lot of like legitimate criticisms about, you know, systemic racism in this country. And a lot of people make the assumption that I'm calling them racist when I'm not. And they make this, you know, false dichotomy, and they get offended by it. And they're like, well, you know what? Maybe I am a fucking racist. And I'm like, a part of me saying like, you know what? I think deep down you kind of always were. You just are now like, you know, it's finally coming. It's finally shining out on you. Like, and that's not my fault. That's just your denial of the situation. So do you think that there are just some men that are just sensitive and vulnerable to the fact that like maybe they're not a good guy, and like hearing these criticisms and then being offended by it is really a projection of them?
Yeah. In the same way that I think that, like, you know, like some people who have a proclivity towards violence may belong to the African American community or not. But I think that it has more to do with a lot of sociocultural.
Yeah, I was going to say this is explained through a lot of socioeconomic factors too. Like
that's the thing with men as well. So like,
I agree.
A few things that we can establish: that less than 1% of men are responsible for violent crimes against women or against otherwise. But the prevailing narrative is men are. That's interesting, but I don't think that that's necessarily a useful rhetorical standpoint for compelling men towards like better modes of masculinity.
Okay.
And I especially don't think that that's like something that's like, you know, amicable to like, you know, trans men's experiences in a lot of ways. But here's the other thing that I'm willing to say.
Okay. Is
that on a basis of double standards, if you're willing to say that men are trash despite representing a minority population, there are more women than men in this country, even though they represent an overrepresentation. If you were to like actually superimpose those standards onto the African American population, you would also have to be willing to say that the African American population is trash, because they also like, you know, like basically represent a minority population, but they overrepresent violent criminality in this country for sociocultural reasons. so to me, there's a double standard there. And I don't think that it's inherent to men's DNA. I don't think that it's something that's like inherent as like as a gender construct. I think a lot of these things are socioculturally engineered in the same way that I think, when it comes to the Black experience, that they're basically impoverished, that they're basically like they're starting from the negative 100-yard line, and that because of those sociocultural conditions, they're immersed in a culture of violence and in a culture of other sociocultural influences that misdirect them.
All right. Well, here, Steve has a good comment about this. Like, so there are men who do stuff but don't get included in that 1%. So like, there's guys that belittle women or are intimidating, tell jokes that hurt women's feelings, confidences and stuff like that.
There are plenty of African Americans who are including the. We all know that the statistics actually underrepresent how much these things transpire. But the same thing is which is that even though the statistics underrepresent how often men are violent or how often men are behaving in a way that's not admirable, that applies to the statistics regarding other demographics, including the African American population. And my feeling is that if the left isn't willing to like accept that, then the left is basically virtue posturing.
So let's do this. Let's do like an example here. So let's say we find ourselves in a situation where we're listening to a woman describe her experience with men, and she's basically makes the statement, all men are trash, fuck men, I fucking hate men, like what's wrong with you guys? How best would you approach her in this situation?
I would say that I believe her and that there's a good chance that what she's saying is correct. Mm-hmm. And I would say that, like when it comes to like, in, Compton or something, and they said that they were violated by somebody who is native to that population, that could be correct as well. But in the same way that I'm not willing to like generalize that on a basis of what's like, rhetorically or morally efficacious to like a generalizable population. It's like, it's not that these people are, it's not their melanin levels are like predetermining this. It's not that like men's testosterone levels are like predetermining this.
Okay.
It's just, yeah.
But okay. All right. Yeah, no, I agree. So do you at least agree that like maybe we should say that as men, we shouldn't get immediately defensive and we should at least respect, their feelings and what they're saying? Like maybe not acknowledge fully, but at least recognize that their feelings are valid.
Feelings are valid, but you would also have to like reluctant towards like people who like feel like reluctantly fearful, like would you say that you accept that?
Wait, can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Would you acknowledge the feelings of are reflexively fearful of African Americans due to the 1330 statistic?
No. Are you saying white people should fear African Americans because of the 1330?
Yes.
No, because it's an irrational. Well,
what's irrational about it?
Well, because it doesn't factor in, because it's a racist narrative, first of all, and it's also.
So how is this not like a sexist narrative?
Well, for me, I view sexism and racism on a power dynamic. This is why I don't. This is why I can say a black person.
But what about statistically speaking? As far as like the statistics are concerned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So like, would you say that like be more fearful of a black person because they have like a disproportional amount of like like apparently violent criminality than like a man does?
Well, I feel like this is not just driven by statistics, it's driven by narratives. The statistics is just used to prop up a narrative. So like in your case,
the narratives more than the statistics.
Well, they kind of complement each other in the sense that like you can because it's just a statistic, right? Like by itself, it could be benign, but if you use it to a narrative to paint black people as violent criminals, then yeah, that's going
wrong, right? But so if you were to like basically superimpose onto all men, that would all. So narratives are one. Donald Trump is basically like trying to legitimize himself on the
So,
basis.
well, all right. Well, let's put the shoe on the other foot here. What if you told someone, a woman who's, disclosing her rape experience, would you then disclose like, well, actually not all men are rapists. You should understand that. Do you feel like that's appropriate in that space or time?
That, like if I said that, like I was also like accosted by somebody who was, like somebody who was just incidentally a member of, racial demographic, I would also accept that as well. But but what it comes down to is whether or not we categorize the entirety of that population down to trash. If you're willing to say that like all men are trash, then you should also be like equally willing to say that the African population is trash. If we're willing to believe both about it.
Here's my situation with it. People who like make these all-encompassing statements, I feel like you need to approach it differently.
Do you admit that also implies to all men are trash narrative?
Yeah, I do. If you want me to say that like the heated emotional response to like a negative experiences with men by women, may have a negative impact on other men. Yes, I agree with you. Like that's
all I'm saying.
Okay,
that is a generalizable statement that's not applicable. And if you're willing to say that about men, you can be willing to say that about other demographics that have an overrepresentation of violent criminality or other forms of criminality. If you're not willing to apply that, not be to men, even though men, yes, need to overcorrect for their behavior, absolutely. But I don't think that it's like that the methodology is correct for men in the same way that like saying that black people were trash, that would not be the right approach to like, correcting what's like, potentially problematic about what's happening in those cultures.
But do you believe that there's also like a time and place for everything? Like, do you think it's immediately important to like, immediately like set the record straight with a person that says all men are trash? Or do you feel like we kind of like gotta kind of coax them into like sort of a more general understanding?
Okay, a time and place. Is it more important for you to be judicious or not?
If I want to,
are you willing to? Okay, yeah, go for it.
I would say I'm trying to be kind of judicious right now with you with what you're trying to say, but I would say the circumstance.
How is it being judicious to like accept that all men are trash if that's like empirically not the case?
From my because maybe my problem is I'm putting myself too much in like the situation of like how I would deal with the situation, but. If I was in that situation, I heard a woman that said all men are trash, I would kind of first, kind of put feelers out and inquire, how you came to this conclusion and like, at least empathize at that level, not necessarily agreeing with what she, not necessarily agreeing with what she's saying, but at least empathizing with her to an understanding where we can kind of like bridge some gaps and maybe make some corrections that way.
I would understand that. Yeah. And like when like somebody who's like a woman like approaches me and says like all men are trash, I know that they're meaning that like, like a lot of guys have been in their DMs and stuff like that. Yeah. But what I'm saying is that on a basis of applicability, on a basis of what is judicious or not judicious, if we can apply that kind of like verbiage to men, we can also apply that to the African American population, because they're also like underrepresented as a population, but also overrepresented as a population of violent criminality. And if you're not willing to apply that to the African American population as effortlessly or as like, easily as you are to like the male population, then I think that there's some cognitive dissonance at play.
Well, maybe there's cognitive dissonance at play because there's a power dynamic that's different from just African American men and men in general.
The power dynamic is literally like a population representation. That's all it is. It's like there are more men in the African Americans in this country. But like I specified before, if men only constituted 13% of the population in the same way that African Americans do, then men would also have a 1350 monopoly on violent forms of assault or persecution. So They're both 1350. I did the math for this, and I can't I'm not accessing this with my computer.
Well,
but
I'm not disagreeing with your math or anything. It's just I feel like the math in this case can only be used as a tool.
If you don't disagree with the math, then you'd also have to say that black people are trash if you're willing to say that white people are trash.
But I feel like this negates a lot of other factors, and this is why we approach things differently.
Okay. What are the other factors?
Well, again, the power dynamic. Like, do we or do we not live in a patriarchal society?
I would say yes.
Okay. So do you feel like there should be a different, I don't want to say standard, but do you feel like we should approach things differently when, people who are affected by patriarchy want to express themselves versus to people who benefit from patriarchy?
So because certain people are victims of patriarchy doesn't mean that the people who are also afflicted by other violent forms of criminality from other populations, they shouldn't
Oh, sure. There are plenty of men that suffer from patriarchy. I'm not disagreeing with that.
No, I'm not saying violent men that like people that suffer from patriarchy. I'm just saying that on a basis of who's being inflicted upon, the criminality is clear. It's not it's not that patriarchy is the overarching thing. It's that there's criminality being inflicted by 13% and 13%, and they're both 50% recipients. So if so, here's the thing: if you were to limit the male population to 13%, it would not be a patriarchal a stranglehold on society. In the same way that if you since the African American population in this country is about 13%, that's not an ethnocentric stranglehold that favors African Americans on the population. So my hypothetical does not cohere with your hypothetical there.
I feel like I'm also
it's not a patriarchy if there's only 13% of a male of a matriarchal population. So but the way that your comparison would work if there was if there was a almost 50% representation of African Americans in the country. So
I feel like I'm approaching this from a blind spot because it's really hard for me to put myself in the situation of say a woman in this circumstance and what
can I see man both?
Is there any women listening that want to chime in to this?
Yeah, everybody's fucking up right now. Here's the thing.
I'm sending out a post right now. We need women.
The reason why this is difficult. Okay. The reason why it's a patriarchy right now. Mm-hmm. Men in this country. If you were to reduce that to a 13% population disparity, then it would not be a patriarchy. The matriarchy would be in charge. But even if it was a 13% population representation of men, then it would, if the statistics were proportional, then it would still be a 1350 male population representation to violent criminality statistic, which is almost perfectly transferable to the 13% population rate with the 50% violent criminality rate of African Americans. So in that scenario, it's not a patriarchy. Women overpopulate the men in that situation. But if people aren't willing to say that, African Americans are trash, even though they only represent a 13% population for 50% of the violent criminality in this country, then they also should not be willing to say that men are trash. Even though they represent their population rate with the violent criminality rate as well. I don't think, but even if somebody was to say hey, men have been more historically abominable, I would agree with that. I think men have been pretty abysmal in that way, but I just don't think that framing that in that way is going to drive men towards bettering or reconsidering their behaviors in a way that's productive or constructive. And I think that's what's most important.
Okay, so is your conclusion then that women should be careful how to criticize men for fear of driving more men away?
Is it that women should be fearful of how they it's not that people should be fearful. It's that people should care about what works and what doesn't work. When I think about like what works and what doesn't, when I debate people, it's not about like me like posturing what's true and what's not true. What it comes down to is what can potentially persuade people, what can potentially like, move people towards like a more empirical, factually relevant direction. So sometimes what feels best and sometimes what works best are two very different things. Sometimes it feels best to be condemning towards a population of people. Sometimes it feels best to express verbal violence towards somebody because we've endured violence towards somebody. But just because it feels best doesn't mean it works best. And if something works better, if rhetoric works better, if rhetoric actually compels more men to change their toxically masculine ways by not calling them trash, then I would absolutely favor not calling them trash if it meant that they treated women better in the long run.
Okay.
Is my thing.
Okay. So here, let's put it like this way. What would you say to a woman, like, after you give that explanation and their response is, I feel like you're invalidating our experiences and situations for the fear of, because you want to coddle men, because you're afraid of like they might become worse.
Here's the thing. Do you want to prevent more of what they experienced, or do you want to enable more of what they've experienced?
Well,
it's
obviously
like,
less.
Do you want more men to double down on the things that, or do you want fewer men to double down on the things that? Well, it's not about coddling men. It's about like it's about telling men that not all of you guys are monsters, and that for those of you who do have damaging tendencies, that it's okay to move away from those things. We don't have to demonize you on the way towards moving away from those things. So I think that there's a level of persuasion there that's humane, but that's also correct. And this also has to do with like, how like there have been studies that have determined how the human brain responds to certain narratives. Mm-hmm. And when people hear arguments that are inflammatory, that are like purely antagonizing, the brain responds to those arguments and it doubles down.
Oh, so do you feel a negative stereotype threat as a man?
No, nope, I don't, because I know myself well enough.
But you feel like a lot of men do.
They can, and I think that it's those men who need to maybe hear a different approach, and it's the people who have tendencies and behaviors that they need to correct, that need to not be demonized so much. And I think that will have a better effect on improving upon toxic masculinity than other forms, rhetorical forms that just immediately categorize them as being an enemy, as being
didn't Shuan Head make a video about this recently?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if you saw it or not. She basically, I think she's touching on this issues of like why, there are, I guess, aren't more male leftists, and like why they go towards people like Andrew Tate and stuff like that, because they're constantly told like, they're the fault of everything.
Are awful. Yeah, I agree. There's a certain amount of that I agree with. I think that men need more positive role models. And I think the only role models with are people like Andrew Tate, and that they're told by women that they suck a lot of the time. And I think that a positive male role model is somebody who's empathetic, somebody who's compassionate, somebody who's dutiful, somebody who's perseverant, but also somebody, who isn't just like reactive to like all these accusations against them. So, anyways, I gotta use the bathroom. You
Yeah,
feel free
sure. What's up, everybody? Yeah, you know what? Hang on. There is this is actually, because I do. There's a quote by Bell Hooks about this. I feel like would help me explain this situation. Let me see if I can pull it up for Bell Hook quotes on men, because I remember reading about it. So, masses of men have not yet begun to look at the ways that patriarchy keeps them from knowing themselves, from being in touch with their feelings, from loving. To know love, men must be able to let go of the will to dominate. They must be able to choose life over death. So, I mean, look, I feel like there's a give and take on all this. Like, yes, I feel like, we should be accommodating and understanding to the concerns of men, but like, I think what a lot of men have to kind of understand is that like a lot of your, frustrations are coming from the unwillingness to let go of privileges.
Oh, hold on a second.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, I agree with what Bell Hooks is saying.
Okay.
But is calling them trash driving them towards introspection?
No. I feel like that's way too derogatory. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's literally what I'm saying.
Okay.
It's like the men are trash like narrative is not driving people to like purposeful, like useful introspection. I think, of course, there's an overrepresentation of men that are not respectful of women. But I think that's more of a sociocultural component. And I don't think that the men are trash like narrative is useful towards men correcting that. I don't think that at all. In the same way that if we told like black people that they're trash, even though they overrepresent like, violent criminality in this country, that would not be useful towards them. It would not be useful towards them. And I think that if you're willing to say that, oh, I don't believe that calling black people are trash is useful, you should also apply that towards men. Because like I said before, if you were to equalize their population rates, they would have similar levels of criminality. So that to me means that they're like basically equal with how they overrepresent their presence with criminality in like their respective domain. I don't think it's useful to accuse either group of that. I don't think that either group is like, responsible for that because of their melanin levels, because of their testosterone levels or whatsoever. I don't think that we should be calling men trash because I don't think that's useful rhetorically. In the same way that I don't think we should be calling like, black people trash because I don't think that's like useful rhetorically either. Mm-mm. So I 1000% agree with Bell Hooks about that. Okay. But I don't think that leftists are on that like level like understanding yet.
Steve wrote something good as a comment. So like this is sort of like a problematic nature of calling someone an alcoholic instead of focusing on taking productive steps, like a harm reduction approach. Is this like, yeah?
I mean, I on that basis, it's almost like, okay, sure, say it. You can say that, like, a lot of men have a problem. I think that, like, it's that's a useful distinction to make. In the same way that you would exclude most African Americans from having that problem in their, sociocultural situations. We can't attribute alcoholism to a population of people where less than 1% of that population is responsible for the thing that we're worried about.
Okay.
And that's kind of my take on that for now. So it's kind of like, if you're willing to say that about white people, you have to be willing to say that about other demographics that also overrepresent violent. And if you're willing to say that about like the black person is the alcoholic of their sociocultural situation, then go for it. But I'm not willing to say that because I don't think it's an addiction. I think that it's basically something that some people are subjected to. And I think that's what makes it different. I think that, like there are so many sociocultural factors that explain why certain marginalized demographics are more predisposed to poverty, are more predisposed to desperation. And I think that desperation is what leads to criminality. In the same way that I think that, like, men are basically deprived of a lot of emotional expression and healthy conduits of masculinity and stuff like that. I don't think that there's an addiction correlation whatsoever. So
if someone says men are trash as a reaction to like someone else sharing their experience of sexual assault, for example, or like reacting to like some statistics about male violence,
I was raped by a woman. Can I say that women are trash?
Is that, I mean, listen, if you, I've heard.
No, I literally was. I'm not just saying that. Like, I literally was raped by a woman.
Oh shit, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but I don't get to say that.
Oh, well, I was going to say, if you wanted to say it, I would listen if it got out your frustration, because you bring that up.
It's not about frustration. There's a reason why I wouldn't attribute that to women, is because like, it's not like women in general.
Because like, that, not all women are like that. But like, I also
that not all men are like that. Sure. More men are like that than women, of course. But is that mostly due to is that because of men? Is that because of testosterone? Is that applied to like who are men? Like, are those trans people also going to be like more like predisposed to like raping women? Are we like willing to like fight as trans men?
The point I was trying to make is that like I hear this from like the opposite end, and like the manospheres, when they're talking about like how like they're so disappointed by women and like how women have ruined them and stuff like that, and they feel like all women are trash and that
That's
matter.
Gross.
Like, wait, what's gross?
The manosphere explanation of it. That's not anything close like what I'm advocating for. I just don't think
I'm not
that like
saying
the
that.
men
I'm
are
not saying that you are either. But
yeah.
I'm trying to put this from the perspective that like a lot of people internalize their experiences too much, that they kind of forget like the bigger picture, and I think that's the crux of the problem here. It's either when men say it, and when
bigger picture though, when they're applying men are trash to a majority population that doesn't commit those crimes. In the same way that like when like if you were to say that black people are trash, you'd be saying that population and the majority of the population does not commit those crimes. It's like I don't think that we can hold both positions as like what I'm saying. I don't think men are trash is a useful rhetorical tool. I don't think that compels more men to become better men. I think that like drives men who might have like dangerous or bad proclivities in the wrong direction. I don't think that we should like be like saying this. I think that instead of saying that men are trash, we should instead be like, basically illuminating what men should otherwise be. Be compassionate, be empathetic, be dutiful, be purposeful, be mindful, don't exceed boundaries, all that kind of stuff. I don't think men are trash is judicious. It generalizes an entire population of people in a way that's not judicious against that population of people. In the same way that if people were to say like Black African Americans are trash, it would also wrongfully demonize a population of people in a way that's not judicious or precise with those population rates of that people. But that's just me.
Okay, all right. I'm not saying that this is my position, but I just want to just provide it. This is from an article. So here's some food for thought. You might not be Harvey Weinstein, but it doesn't mean you're not complicit in violence and aggression against women. For instance, ask yourself if you've ever excused a friend's violent behavior towards women, or remained friends with a known abuser or aggressor, or if you've victim shamed a survivor before. If you've answered yes to any of the above, I have some bad news for you. It's much too easy to be passive when you hear something you don't agree with. Standing up for women and being a good guy isn't a bandwagon you can jump on and off at your pleasure. If you really do want to be seen as an example of not all men, you should start acting like it. So do things that separate you from all men and try to do what's right, not what's easy.
Imagine that we say let's reverse that rhetoric and say that African Americans. Has somebody, African American violence?
I
Here's
think
the thing, though. Here's the thing, though. I actually do fit the category of what they're saying. It's like, if you knew anything about the lore, it's that as soon as somebody was actually the recipient of sexual abuse, I played a very like formative and fundamental role in making sure that person was not a factor in that situation. But
wait, can you repeat that? I'm sorry, I didn't hear all that.
Are you familiar with the former admin who committed sexual assault against somebody? And
are you talking about? Oh, are you talking about what's his face against what?
Yeah.
Okay, I remember that. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, when there was evidence of sexual assault, there's nobody who moved more rigorously against and more decisively and spent more time moving against that than I did. I made sure they weren't a factor in that situation. So yes, there's a component of that, but at the same time, I don't know what the other point of that like article was trying to. It's that yes, we can move against those things, but like generalizing a broader population is not in the best interest of the population. In the same way that just because a few Hamas insurgents inflict upon Gaza, we should not get like collectively punish the population. There's probably there's a greater percentage of Hamas participants who are responsible for their atrocities than Palestinians who were complicit in that shit.
Okay,
it's a form of collective punishment that I don't think is judicious, and I don't think it drives men towards the right position.
Okay, here's another way that they framed it. So they basically said, so we all know that snakes are dangerous, yet there are some snakes which are not deadly at all. However, you never hear people say some snakes are dangerous, some are not. They just say snakes are dangerous because it is hard for the average person to tell which snakes are dangerous and which snakes are not. So they urge people to be cautious of all snakes. Now, maybe that's not the best comparison because I don't think men are snakes.
Wait, well, imagine if we
applied this to African Americans.
Most people, yeah, both, either way would undermine your argument. Over 76% of Palestinians agree that is fighting for Palestinian interests. So if you believe that the people who are inflicting the damage should also be conflated with the snakes who are merely, then you would agree with what Israel's doing against the Palestinian population. That's a form of collective punishment, which is not judicious. It's not judicious to say that men are trash. I don't believe that it's judicious to say that men are trash. And in addition to saying that men are trash, I don't believe that it also consequentially compels men towards better modes of behavior. I don't think that it's correct or utilitarian, in my view. Even though I understand, when somebody who's a female friend of mine says that men are trash, I know what they're talking about. But and I sympathize with that. But I don't think that drives a majority of men towards better behavior. I think that just makes them double down on their bad behavior. So
you just think that people should stop saying all men are trash?
I don't think that it's a useful narrative, yeah.
So do you feel like in order to help mitigate that saying, do you feel like we as men should probably ask, how can I help in that situation?
Yeah. How can I help? Or how can I provide better example, be a more positive form of masculinity than the alternatives?
But do you also think then that some men should not have a knee-jerk reaction to that statement and take it so personally?
Do you think that people should take it personally if they hear that African Americans are trash? That's the equivalent I'm trying to make. So if you were to say that to the African population, should they not take that, be the big person about that?
I assume they should. I'll bite that bullet. I assume
they superimpose the same statistics. That's what I've been trying to convey to you.
I assume that they shouldn't take that personally
because the
male
population comprised of only 13%, then it would also be a 50% criminality rate for population. So should we be able to tell the 13% male population of the African American community, or the 30% population of the African American community in general, should we be able to tell them that they're trash, and should they be able to take that in stride?
I would assume that they shouldn't take that personally either, because I think anybody who's saying that is being a racist.
So then do it. I want you to do it.
Wait, you want me to 13%? Wait, you want me to say African Americans are trash?
Say that on your Facebook then. African Americans are trash.
But I don't believe that.
Okay, fine. But if you don't believe that, then if African Americans constituted 50% of the population rate, okay, proportionally, they'd also be responsible for 90% of like the violent criminality. It would like literally be interchangeable male to violent criminality population.
I guess
if you're not willing to say that about men, then you shouldn't be willing to say that about African Americans. Is the point I'm making? Like, oh god,
the
this is like a double standard thing.
Hold on. The point I was trying to say, because like you said, like, if I was an African American and I heard the statement all African Americans are trash, I wouldn't take that personally, because I would assume anybody saying that is racist.
Maybe you're remembering this better. It's not that if you're an African American, as a white person, would you be willing to say that to an African American and accept that they should not be take that personally? If you're willing to say that, like, hey, African Americans are trash because a 1350 thing is crazy, do you think that they should accept that you guys are trash because of 1350?
No, they should.
Are you willing to say that? Should you post that on your Facebook right now? Say like, African Americans are trash because of 1350.
Okay, if I said to an African American that they're trash based on your statistics, I think that African Americans should not take it personally and just view me as a fucking racist.
True, they should. But at the same time, then I would like view, like, if we're being like equal about that. So like it would not be serviceable, because Miss Andrea is not ideal. So what I'm saying, literally all I'm saying. Let me like also like basically convey like my moral orientation about this. Men have a lot of behavior to correct, and there might be a social, cultural explanation for that. But the way to help correct that behavior that they're responsible for and that they've been responsible for is not to categorize them as trash. Is to create better examples of what to be. In the same way that it's like, it's not that we should settle for Biden. It's that we should settle for, or that we should accept a candidate that has more to offer. Accept like the explanation that has more to offer, not the condemnation explanation. Biden is the condemnation explanation. That guy is like complicit with genocide. That guy is like way too accepting of things that are not acceptable. What's important is to provide the alternative, not to basically condemn people. When you condemn people, you drive them farther towards the things that you don't want to see more of. And that's all that I'm saying. And that's my thing. But I think that it's the situation I'm getting is, man, you got a lot of shit to say about African Americans. I'm just fucking with you.
I was gonna say, you son of a bitch. You're the one putting me in this hypothetical. This is not my actual representation.
But you answered the questions. I'm putting you in.
Well, yeah,
but I don't think you believe these things. I don't think you believe in things either. Yeah.
This is the problem that I have with this, because like I do agree that men are trash is most likely an unhelpful statement.
Literally all I'm saying. That's all we have to agree on.
Okay. I guess again, it's really hard for me to be like the devil's advocate here, because like I'm not a woman, so like I feel like I got a lot of blind spots. I feel like it would be more authentic if we had some women putting their 2 cents in.
It's because like, do women have like, does like identity determine like what's like?
Identity does.
Black person, they say that 2 + 2 = 5. Does that mean that they're like
this is not
right?
This is not just a purely mathematical connotation here. It's basically identity does fuel life experiences. Like,
okay, any women who want to like make this like that men also have to make this claim about black people from now on, because like if we were to like equalize
those are the rules.
like,
those are the rules they have to do.
Those are the rules. No, like literally, like if you like, I've fucking done the math. If like men represented 13% of the population, it'd be and if you're willing to say that like men are black people are trash, I'm fucking sorry. I'm fucking sorry about that. That's a fucking mess.
I feel like it's people. What if a woman has actually had nothing but good experiences with African Americans, but like bad shit about bad things happen to them with men? Like, are they allowed to say men are trash? But
whole argument, it's like, what if my anecdote like disproves
it's
like
not an anecdote? I don't know anything. I'm just giving a hypothetical.
What if my bad? I literally have a bad experience with a woman and zero bad.
Hey, I am not trying to invalidate you. I am not trying to invalidate your bad.
I know, but that means that like it's not about any one person's experience with raped by a woman. I've had zero bad like violent like like experiences with men or women. I've never been fight before. But that's
hold on. I feel like I've been giving you some leeway with this because I already agree with you because the phrase is unhelpful. The point that
that's like literally all I'm talking about.
My frustration though is, can you at least meet me halfway, and that maybe men should not have such a knee-jerk reaction to that statement? Because if they know that they're a good guy,
knee-jerk reaction to the statement. I'm speaking for men who would have a knee-jerk reaction to that statement. I don't. A lot of my female friends talk to me about like how like men have been like shitty to them, and I completely understand. But I'm more so talking about like the men who are like susceptible to that narrative, or not susceptible to that. If a woman comes up to me and they say like, oh, a dude has been like awful to me, I'm like, oh, I fucking get it. Like I know that dudes are fucking awful on Tinder, they're awful on Bumble. I don't think it's a rhetorically effective standpoint. In the same way, if somebody was like to grow up in Compton, oh man, I was like robbed and like mugged by this guy, I'd be like, okay, but like you were like especially like exposed to that situation. I don't think that like represents like melanin levels.
Okay, all right. So do you feel like it's equally making sure that we avoid toxic generalized statements like all men are trash, as well as educating other men to not take what women say seriously? Because I think a lot of women are frustrated, and maybe we shouldn't take them so literally, and we should probably explain why you shouldn't be offended by that if they happen to say it. Like I mean,
if we want to inoculate men against that, but I also think that like it's to just like if efficacy matters, to not make that narrative jump. Because I think that like even if they have patience for it, it's not helping their situation. By like saying that like all men are trash, they're making men who have those like damaging tendencies double down on it, and they're potentially driving other men who don't have those damaging tendencies to like run in the other direction that like endangers more women. If people are going to be consequentialists, whether it's women or otherwise, don't take that narrative standpoint. I'm a fucking consequentialist, Mike. Like all I care about is like whether or not more women or less women are assaulted. And I'm just saying that like this like narrative standpoint is not useful. That's like literally all. And like, and that's why I think that women ideally will not utilize and deploy that narrative against men. Because it's not going to help their chances, and it's not going to help men become what they should otherwise be.
What if I were to tell you that almost sounds like women shouldn't dress slutty if they don't want to be raped?
I would tell you that is a fantastical statement. I don't know how the fuck you're like drawing like a comparative.
Well.
Oh my god! I'm just like saying like women shouldn't call men like all men trash.
Okay. All right. Here, let's do an experiment. All right. Since there's hold on, let me check the comments really fast. Let's see if any women commented. Okay, no, they haven't. But okay, all right. I'll be the woman. All right. I'm gonna try at least. So
You are the one.
that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. All right. So I'm the woman here. So I'm gonna say all men are trash. They're fucking trash. They're fucking assholes. Like, I'm fucking done with them. Like, why are all fucking men like this, David? Yeah. So, what would you say to me?
I would say, what would I say to you if you said that to me?
Yeah, like I just did. Are you not listening? Do men not listen? Men never fucking listen. They're always stuck in their fucking minds doing stuff. Like, what is your fucking problem? I'm sorry.
I just heard you say that all men are trash. Like, am I not listening to you?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I would say I understand. This is what I would say to somebody, because I've had people that there's a disproportionate number of men who are unsympathetic, and there's a disproportionate number of men who feel sexually emboldened to behave in ways that are not acceptable. But that I think that the narrative of all men are trash.
Yeah, well, where are those men? I've yet to see a man like that. Where are they?
Wait a second. You're talking to me. I am the paragon. I am the paragon of men who do not behave that way. You tell me then, in that situation, one time when I've behaved towards you that way.
Okay, you got me there. Sorry, I was just a little angry. Okay.
It's okay.
It's all right. But you understand, he was just a fucking asshole. Like, we were going on a wonderful date, and I had my nice shoes, it was a nice outfit, and then he shows up like a fucking slob, and then he thinks that by paying for my fucking meal that means I have to fuck him, and no, that's not the fucking way how it works. And then he got fucking mad at me, and then he fucking stormed off.
I think that'd be how many men have done that? Are you talking about one guy?
It seems like that's just the standard that men fucking expect. Oh, I'm sorry. I can, or they get offended where I can just pay for my half. You don't have to pay for my fucking thing. Why do you assume that you always have to pay for my fucking deal? I probably make more money than this person anyway. I'm highly successful here.
Yeah. So I would need, first of all, citation needed. I need more information.
I'm not doing good at this. I'm sorry. I'm really not doing good at this.
You're magnificent at this. But it's also that I'm going to say to you, what I've said to a lot of women, and a lot of my female friends, most of my friends are women, by the way. That's how it's happened. Mm-hmm. But it's that I know that there are a lot of men who do not treat women the way that they deserve to be treated. And even when it comes to double standards, I've heard stories about how things go down. That doesn't mean that it's the overall population of men, but I think we can almost also, this is a giant component that we've been missing in this conversation. This also has more to do with men in the United States and other parts of the Western world. I
would love to date a European guy for once. Maybe that's what I'm going to do.
That's also the thing, is that when we're talking about apparently a massive minority of men commit violent crimes against women in other parts of the Western world, Europe especially, has even more infinitesimal. So there are other parts of the world where what I'm talking about has demonstrated itself to be true, where certain forms of masculinity, and that's resulted in more positive forms of male and masculine expression. But they didn't need a narrative of men are trash to facilitate that. That wasn't the necessary component of that. And in the same sense that it's kind of I don't think that it's helpful to tell people that they're the worst iterations of themselves when they haven't demonstrated that about themselves. And to the extent that you're saying, I've had a lot of women tell me I've had a lot of bad messages on Tinder. I've had a lot of bad messages on Bumble, but I eventually found the right person. I eventually found somebody who was listening. I eventually found me, which happens most of the time. It's usually me. Let's be reasonable. It's usually me who's for example. But then they'll say that doesn't mean that men aren't overrepresenting bad behavior. I will totally accept that. men do overrepresent bad behavior when it comes to that kind of thing. But in the same way that we can't chastise other demographics for overrepresenting bad behavior, especially when it's a minority of that demographic that's responsible for that, we can't chastise men for that kind of thing. If we're not willing to say that African Americans are trash for overrepresenting crime, where they overrepresent crime, I don't think that it's useful to chastise men for overrepresenting certain things by categorizing them as trash, especially when you consider that if they exhibited the same population rates, they'd be responsible for the same levels of criminality. So if you're not willing to say that about African Americans, but that does not mean that you stop criticizing toxic masculinity. I just think that saying that men are trash is not a judicious statement, and that does not ameliorate the problem. I think that instead of saying that men are trash, you provide examples of good masculinity, like as an alternative. That is what I'm saying. I hope the dimensions of what I'm expressing are understandable.
Quick question. Are all cops bastards?
What?
Are all cops bastards?
Why are you asking me this question?
Are all cops bastards?
I don't like authority. Why are you asking me that?
Are all cops bastards?
Are you going to say that just because like a few cops are bastards, that because I'm willing to apply that to like cops, it means that we should apply that to men?
Here's the thing. I don't know. I'm really reaching. I'm sorry. I know.
I know you're reaching. I know you're extremely reaching. I already have an answer for this, Michael.
Okay.
It's like if you go to like the European countries like Norway, they not like infringe upon this population. In 2013, the Norwegian police force like fired a shot once, and that was to like warn somebody away with it. It's not that a security force is bad. It's like how like that security force like like administers like its security. So in the United States, the police force fucking sucks. For the most part, I could make that generalizable statement to a certain degree, because I think that like most of like the police force should be like freaking figured to like social work and stuff like that, or de-escalatory tactics. But after like, it's been like relegated to de-escalatory tactics, European like police tactics have been. I think police for like some form of security is good. I don't think we should abandon like, like all forms of that, because like police forces in other parts of the world have actually like really like, prove themselves. So
but do you think that if a cop heard the phrase all cops are bastards, would they be like, oh yeah, all cops are bastards then? Well then I guess I'm gonna be a SWAT team member then.
But that would be like actually more applicable to cops in America. If you were to say that to like cops in like Norway, like if you were just like all cops are bastards in Norway, it's like, what the fuck? Like my friend like Svelte like fired his gun once. My friend Svelte like fired his like gun once, and you're saying all cops are bastards? Like that's like less than 1% of like cops in Norway. Why are you saying we're all bastards? Most of us don't fucking suck that much. That would be like the analogous argument for like African Americans in this country, because Svelte fucking sucks, but cops in Norway are actually kind of fucking base. I've like seen how they de-escalate situations. They're like very pro-proletariat. Like they don't super suck.
All right.
So,
all right. Let me raise you something, because somebody actually commented on my post, but this is from Daniel Bullreich, trans man. So, we might get a kind of a differentiating perspective on it, but so. He definitely says it's a complicated matter. He says, I think that it does make men defensive when the phrase is said, because often they think, well, not me or not all men, but I think there is a valid reason for it. So it's kind of like, this is where I got the all cops are bad example. So yes, there are good ones, but the bad outweighs the good to a point it makes people unsafe. So women and those who have female parts have an ingrained fear of men due to the structured abuse they have caused. Often it's become such a I can't believe they actually typed in, hold on, I lost my train of thought. Okay, so then he says, okay, so like men are trash. Women often can't go anywhere without feeling the need to be extra vigilant and anxious, constantly feeling watched, unsafe, or in a fear of safety. So constantly harassed by men on how they dress or look. And on top of that, men are taking away their reproductive and bodily rights to abortion.
One second.
Okay.
How would that person feel walking?
Well, let me just finish reading.
No, I'm asking. I'm
not Daniel, so I don't want to. I'm not Daniel, so I can't answer on Daniel's behalf. Are you bombing me right now?
Yes, I am. I'll be on top.
Hold on, let me just finish this. So it's very fair to say, yes, all men are bad. The few men are good need to work harder to change the what is this? Redirect and stop toxic masculinity. That's not to say that they aren't, but it very much is a statement that stands for the fact that women don't feel safe still. It's kind of like no man is good until men hold each other accountable. There are men who are working hard to fix this, but it's still very much a thing. And then he says, Then again, what do I know? It's just kind of my mentality on the matter. Trying to say not all men would downplay how women feel, just as it does saying, and then that.
What he's saying would like downplay how feel walking through content. It's like fine, but it's like I think this is more very centric to the United States, and other parts of the Western world, whether it's Scandinavia or whether it's other parts of European countries, I don't think that this kind of fear is as predominant, and I think that indicates that it's more of a sociocultural situation than it is that's anything that's endemic to men. And I think that the Scandinavian countries, we can redefine what healthy masculinity is. We don't have to do that by saying that you all fucking suck. I don't think that's necessarily the best way of redirecting toxic masculinity. I will completely admit there's a grotesque over-representation of toxic masculinity in the United States. I've heard that from so many of my female friends. Dudes extremely suck here. But I don't think that that's an effective rhetorical tool for that. And I don't think that that's endemic to men. I think that's mostly sociocultural factors. And that's basically my standpoint about it. Men are trash, not effective rhetorically. It's going to drive men to double down on their problematic tendencies, or it's going to drive men who don't currently have problematic tendencies to abandon feminism. And by abandoning feminism, they're more likely to commit those atrocities against women. I think it's pro-feminist to not say that men are trash. To say that, look, men, you need to be redirected. You need to have a different conceptualization of what masculinity should be. It's not the Andrew Tate shit. It's not the sex trafficking shit. It's not the fuckboy shit. It's being mindful. It's being dutiful. It's being purposeful. It's being aspirational. It's also being compassionate towards what you have to be to make women feel safe, to make women feel protected, to make women feel heard, all that kind of stuff. So that's basically my orientation. But my orientation is completely incompatible with men are trash. I want to tell men that they could be better. So,
well, I agree with you. I want to say that men it should be better if we want, this, if we want the phrase all men are trash to be less heard of. So comment. So is David saying the power structure of the patriarchy bad, but men good?
No, patriarchy is not good. I'm saying that what's basically mitigate the patriarchy is not the narrative crash. Patriarchy is not good. Of course, men, no, it should not be whatsoever. But I don't think that basically saying that men are trash is a way to mitigate what's most damaging about male behavior.
I'm sorry, you were saying that. I got this random message from this dude saying, "Hello, beautiful lady. I could stake thousands of dollars on your pretty smile. Are you interested in having a sugar daddy to support you?" David, men are trash. Men are fucking trash. I'm sorry. No, listen, I do agree with you, and I know I'm trying to. I'm at my wit's end here with being the devil's advocate. Like, obviously, from my perspective, if I hear someone uttering,
what did that person say again? Could you repeat that?
Yeah,
that's like Tourette syndrome. Like, what was that again?
So he said, "Hello, beautiful lady. I could stake thousands of dollars on your pretty smile. Are you interested in having a sugar daddy to support you?"
Oh God, that sounds like some profile that's like trying to, and that's like further evidence like the men are trash like narrative is a scam. It's like when somebody like infiltrates or like DMs like that. Like it's like every woman who I've ever had complain about somebody who's like, "Oh, just let me take care of you, baby," sounded just like that. So if anybody like if there's any reason to invalidate somebody's opinion, it would be a reason to invalidate that person's opinion. So, but feel free to debate me in DMs instead, and I will post the screenshots afterwards.
Wait, what am I debating you on?
No, not you, that guy, that person. I would love to have a conversation with that person. I would love to have a conversation with that, like, opportunistic predator in your DMs.
I'm just like, well, what's bugging me? It's like, does he assume I'm a woman? I mean, mind you, my profile picture is not my picture. It's an American flag, but still. I did send him a screenshot of me like, "Oh, really? Yeah? I could be my sugar daddy?"
I don't blame you whatsoever. We can all use a sugar daddy.
I want a sugar. We all need. Yeah, I want some type of sugar. That's for sure.
Same.
Whew. This is fun.
I need prolapse sugar. That's fun. I like exploring these topics.
No, me too.
I think like, okay, let's go on what we agree.
Okay.
It's that like the women are disproportionately subjected to really bad behavior by men in this country.
Agreed.
We can agree with that, right?
Yeah.
But whether or not men are trash is like the best rhetorical method for addressing that. Like I just disagree. In the same way that some people are like more disproportionately subjected to violence from other demographics. It's not fair to say that, right? Or do we not agree? Or agree?
I would say that it's probably an unproductive way to bridge divides. Yeah.
What would be your alternative? Like, how would you promote? Because I have an answer for that. But
hold on. Are you asking me what women ought to say about being frustrated with men?
It's not about like women. It's just like, what do men need to hear to I guess get rid of all like these damaging tendencies that they've accumulated over the years from like the 90s, the 80s, 70s. Like I don't want to make this about like what women should say. Like what does the problem source that are men
I think men need to understand that they may be victims on some things, but by and large, they benefit more from the structure of the society that they live in. And they need to acknowledge that and come to terms with it.
So what's an example of healthy masculinity? Like what?
Healthy masculinity. Oh, sure. Sure. Healthy masculinity is not being ridiculed for your feelings, being able to express yourself fully and not be feeling pressured or bullied into conforming to some type of notion of what is a man that we commonly think of. I don't want to make it too wordy, so I'll just stop right there. I think.
So here's what I think like healthy masculinity is it's being efficacious. It's being capable. But what does it mean to be capable? I think being dutiful is important. I think being disciplined is important. But I think empathy also has like an important.
Yeah, there has to be. Yeah, there has to be a sense of care. Yeah.
Yeah. I think empathy also is something that prevents men from inflicting the worst upon other people.
I think men should also Men should also know that the people that don't care about men's problems the most are other men, and they need to recognize and acknowledge that, because they are the ones holding you back the most, not women. Not saying that there could be bad women that will, make your life terrible, because there are. I guess I would explain it in that situation. You shouldn't be upset that some women have found a way to twist the patriarchal game where they are able to benefit from it. Like, if you want to like address like bad women, I mean, you still have to address what we find to be acceptable manliness and unacceptable manliness, and often change our perspective. Like, what is manliness and what is so-called effeminate, which really isn't.
And that's the thing, like a lot of men like think being very controlling of women, which is, it's like you can't dress up in a way that makes you feel self-satisfied.
Yeah.
Because that feels like a threat to me.
Yeah,
insecurity. Here's the thing. Insecurity is not manliness.
No, insecurity is not manliness.
If the person you're dating looks good and you're so insecure that you think they should not dress up that way, that's fucking brittle as hell.
That's
fucking
basically my fiance's ex. You're just describing right there.
Yeah, that's not manliness at all. And like men who are not like willing to like express their feelings or introspect, it takes courage to express feelings. It takes courage to be vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely.
It takes courage to introspect. All those things, like the fact that it takes courage is a masculine quality. I don't mean masculine belongs to men or women. I mean masculine in the gender neutral sense, where it's like, look, if you're willing to express yourself, that means that you're willing to exhibit bravery in the person that you're surrounded by, in the people that you're surrounded by. And that's a magnificent thing. People who shy away from expressing themselves are demonstrating weakness.
Good.
It's important to show your emotions. It's important to be vulnerable and to be strong despite being vulnerable. It's important to give your girlfriends, your partners, whoever they are, the freedom to be themselves without restricting their freedom. That's what masculinity is allowing for greater freedom without being threatened by that freedom. That's what it is.
I would say a good man is someone who helps bring about those qualities and props them up against, the toxic traits of masculinities that like to keep those suppressed. So I think it's a very important role for guys to play in that matter, to stick up for other men in that perspective, in that situation, I should say.
1,000%.
Yeah.
A lot of things that are considered to be masculine are actually really dependent on fragility, and a lot of things that are considered to be feminine require a lot of strength, and that's kind of how I feel about it. So, but that's just a me thing. Like, I don't know. Do you have anything else to say about that, or?
No, I feel like you've hit a lot on that. I feel like anything I say would just be a repeat. I just, again, like, if you want to be a good guy, you kind of have to be more vigilant on what, are toxic traits that are found in the masculine patriarchal society that we see. And if you have no idea what that means, well, you should at least make an effort to listen to the people who have been negatively affected by that. And a lot of them are women, so.
They are. Mm-hmm. And I guess like the only thing I would say about that is like condemning those people as trash is going to repel people from like the helpful narratives more than it helps. But as a consequence, I think that's just me. And you might have a good reason for disagreeing with that. I'm not saying that.
Well, I'm not saying that I necessarily disagree with it, but I would say if you're one of those guys that wants to be a better man, if you hear that phrase, I would take a moment and pause and think about like everything that we like talked about and like how you can do better to mitigate those sayings.
Here's the thing. This is what I'm talking about though, is like even if 30% of men, because they hear that phrase, they're repelled by their betterment. that's what I have a problem with.
Okay.
It's that like that's what I have a problem with. It's like if the rhetoric behind that statement prevents enough men from like, you know, bettering themselves, then to me that's not the rhetorically optimal statement. That's all I'm saying. But then somebody from the other side could say, like, if we didn't call men trash, then maybe a portion of men who wouldn't consider that they were behaving badly. But like, I wouldn't know how to quantify that. So I think that would be like the steel man, like from the position but it is what it is.
I sympathize with your position. I really do. I just, for me, shit. Again, like, we need to bring this back. We need to bring this back, and we need to get some like actual women perspective, not me like trying to fake it. So,
man, but like identity doesn't prove legitimacy. It's like, but that could be cool. But like at the same time, it's like, where was I going to go with that? It's what matters to me is what makes men less toxic, and
sure,
that's requires like certain rhetorical positions.
I agree with you that all like these generalized negative all-encompassing statements are unproductive, and if this sounds like tone policing, I apologize, but yeah, people ought to be careful what they say publicly when they vent frustrations, for sure.
Well, what else are you up to tonight? Are you going to have fun? Do anything?
Shit, I don't know what I'm supposed to do tonight. I'm supposed to.
I wish you could do karaoke with us. We're doing karaoke in like 2 hours.
2 hours? Well,
yeah.
If I'm not doing anything, I'll pop in.
No. We're going to a bar.
Oh, I thought you were doing one of those online deals again. Sorry.
Yeah, and not this time. I like karaoke.
Like, okay. I gotcha.
Anymore. So.
Well, what do you want to do this again?
Whenever you want to. And if you want to have people like debate me and like take the task of me about this subject, we can. Okay. If you want to get some women involved, do it. I'm totally about it. I have no running a gauntlet.
Okay. So when's the next day you're free?
Let me see. Like, when's the next day I have a day off?
Or the next day or the next. So, wait, you said you can do any time after work and you're off at like 11.
Yeah, let me see.
Because if that's the case, like if I just have to wait for you to get off of work, then I can do next Thursday, 30th. So,
okay. So do we want to have like a men are trash debate?
Okay, let's do that. Let's see if we can find some people that can actually have a more stronger stance against that, and let's see what happens.
Okay, let's do it. So okay. I think I have the day off. No, I think that'd be really fun. Okay. That means I'm also going to be able to do some research. So do so at your peril, Miss Andress. But yeah, like I have Thursday off next week.
Okay. All right.
We can do Thursday.
Okay. Cool. All right. Sounds like a plan. All right. Well, I guess this. I guess this wraps it up for everybody. I'm kind of hungry, so I'm gonna get some food.
I'm kind of hungry too.
Yeah.
It's not because I have citizenship, but yeah, it is what it is.
All right. Well, we'll shoot for something. We'll shoot for something Thursday. I wanted to kind of debate Austin on whether or not Israel is apartheid, but I don't know if I can cram all my information in a day.
Let's have a bunch of debates. Women could debate me about whether.
Okay. Yeah. I'll see if Austin wants to fucking. I'll see if Austin's available, and we can. Okay. Yeah. All right.
Love you, buddy.
All right.
It's been awesome.
Yeah, it's been fun as always. Take it easy. And bye, guys. Thanks for watching. Take care.